Usually in these intros I do either a funny skit or a dad joke, but I'm just going to give a little anecdote this time, telling how I bought this pistol, my P08 Luger. I was at a gun show recently. It was actually the Missouri Valley Collectors Association gun show, and it was much, much better than the usual arcade gun shows that we have here in Kansas City. I mean, it took me 3 times as long to go through this one just because, one, it was packed with mainly antique, curio and relic, and milsurp type guns. 2, it didn't have all the like Cincy booths and jerky booths and people trying to sell you siding and all that crap that you see at normal gun shows. This was all guns. So it was packed, and it was guns I was interested in. There weren't very many modern guns there. So it took me about 3 hours to go through there, where it usually takes me only about an hour to get through the normal arcade gun show. And I had my little gun show buddy with me, my little 3-year-old son, and he had a blast. Well, after going through and looking, because I went to that gun show that day, basically I wanted to come out with a Luger, a good working Luger, because the one that I had currently, it has some issues, so I just wanted something that worked well. And I sold an AK the day before, so I had the cash ready and all that. So anyway, as I go through, and I come back to this, as I made it all the way through, I came back to this one table that had one that I was really interested in. It was a World War I era Luger that the guy came down some to me, and basically I'm like, well, okay, I'll think about it. And because he didn't take my initial offer, and he said, well, this is as low as I can go. And I said, oh, okay, I'll think about it. So I basically went to get some more cash out of the car, because I didn't quite have enough cash in my pocket. But as I said, I sold an AK the day before, so I had plenty of money to get this. And when I make my way back, there's a dude who's literally 100 years old there. I mean, he could barely speak. He had to kind of write down his offer and write down everything. And I'm not joking when I say 100 years old. I mean, my dad's knocking on the door of 80, and this guy looked like he had a quarter century on my dad. But it's maybe it's a last person just to make this guy happy or whatever. So I didn't bother with it. And the guy behind the table who was selling the gun was looking at me and saying, he's kind of shaking his head. And after I just kind of watching the transaction go down. And after the old dude bought it, the other guy apologized to me. He's like, I'd rather had you buy that, and because you would have probably gave it to him, because I had my son with me. And I was a little sad on missing out on that one, because I mean it was a nice World War I era Luger. It had the holster with it, the takedown tool, it had everything with it. And I said, well, no problem, because the old guy who bought it, that might be the last gun he ever buys. And if it makes him happy or whatever. I mean, like I said, the guy was literally 100 years old. I was, it's kind of shocking that he was ambulatory. But anyway, I had my eye on a second one if this one fell through, and this one was actually a little bit cheaper because it's a World War II era. As you can see, if that focuses, 1937, made by Mauser. So, and this one was, quite a bit less expensive than the World War I one. I still would have liked to have the World War I one, but I was still happy because, I took it out and it shot well. And following the intro will be my video on it. Welcome to the Milsurp Mike channel. Although I've had at least one Luger in my collection for several years now, I finally obtained one that gave me a good experience shooting. The first one I owned was a mixed match of parts. The year 1918, along with the S42 Mauser designation, makes this obvious. It produced several malfunctions the only time I took it out shooting, but I was just using 115 grain ball ammo, and I later learned that Lugers really like heavier grain ammo. I cannot complain too much though, as that Luger I got fairly cheaply, and in an epic horse trading day of driving all over Missouri, it turned into my SVT-40. My second Luger is in much better shape, and the numbers are mostly matching. The ones that don't aren't too important, such as the takedown level. Still, this one does not eject rounds and is in essence a single-shot pistol. I believe all I need to do is put a Wolf Springs kit on it, which I've already ordered. Keep an eye on that, as this might be a possibly future video. I wanted a good working Luger that I could actually compare to other World War I belligerent nation sidearm offerings, and I finally obtained the one you see in the video today. Although not of World War I vintage, it at least gives me a feel to compare to the Webleys, the French MLE 1892, the US M1911, the Colt and Smith & Wesson M1917, the Steyr M1912, and the Nagant the M1895. It seems like certain countries followed the same patterns when it came to rifle designs in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The British MO, they would pretty much decide they need an upgrade, start on a path, make incremental changes while sticking with what works, even when it becomes obsolete. This was the case of the Lee Enfield rifles and Webley revolvers, as they stuck with those even through World War II. The French had a tendency to make huge leaps that would move weapons designs forward by a generation, but in their own weapons these leaps were an exercise in poor execution. First smokeless powder round, put it in a 2-magazine rifle. Using a swing gate revolver, pair it with an anemic cartridge. The Germans, on the other hand, would stick with what works for a long time and then make a huge leap forward in short periods of time. While their rifle development roughly tracked with their counterparts, they went from being behind the curve to making arguably the best bolt-action rifle that was copied the world over. And then a jump came in World War II when they pretty much skipped over mass-produced semi-auto rifles, because let's face it, the K-41 was an absolute failure, and the K-43 and G-43 were produced in very small quantities compared to the K-98. They jumped from the bolt-action rifle to the assault rifle in the STG-44. In their pistol development, they went from the more than obsolete 1873 Reichsrevolver to the revolutionary P08 Luger. The Luger pistol was developed by Georg Luger. Georg was born in Austria, but he went to schools in Italy and again in Vienna, so he knew Italian and German. He went into the military and ended up in the military firearms school, where he gained an interest in auto-loading systems. After the military, he became an accountant. Here he met Ferdinand Mannlicher, who rekindled his interest in magazine designs, and Ludwig Lowe employed him to sell the Mannlicher 118 rifle in Italy since he knew Italian. In 1894, Lowe, now DVM, sent him to the United States to sell the military on the Borchardt C93 pistol. It was soundly rejected, but Luger used criticisms to create his own pistol, which he patented in 1898, the Pistol Parabellum, in 7.65 by 21 Parabellum, or known in the U.S. as 30 Luger. The first production pistol was the model 1900 Parabellum. The Swiss Army was the first to adopt the pistol, and it was issued to officers of several nations for testing and evaluation while being sold commercially. The German Navy adopted a version in 1904 in 9x19 Parabellum that sports the barrel that's a little longer than the standard Lugers, but shorter than the later artillery Lugers. This was the Pistol 04 and is very desirable on the collector markets. The 1906 model replaced the mainspring with a more reliable coil spring, which became the standard for all Lugers after that. Finally, the German Army replaced the obsolete Reichsrevolver in 1908 with the pistol model 1908, or P08 Luger. This was the German sidearm throughout World War I. The United States flirted with Luger in .45 ACP, but it malfunctioned more than the two finalists, the Savage and John Moses Browning's Colt that later became the M1911. The Luger uses a toggle lock action, which means it needs a hotter, heavier ammunition to eject reliably. Weaker ammo tends to lead to stovepipes, and ammunition quality is key to this pistol. Remember when I mentioned the U.S. flirted with Luger in .45 ACP? The trials guns worked great with the DVM supplied ammunition, but failures occurred with other ammo. When choosing a weapon, it is advantageous to select the weapon that isn't finicky, as quality control during wartime mass production can wane. In the interwar years, DVM produced the Luger for commercial sales. In 1930, Mauser took over production from DVM. While replaced by the P38 Walther as the official pistol, a much better, simpler design, many officers still preferred the P08. Now there's an old Roy S. Durstein quote, "The English fight for honor, the French for glory, but the Americans fight for souvenirs." Now, I believe this is a quote that Othais and the World War I museum curator were trying to come up with the other day. During the war, Lugers were a prized souvenir for American soldiers, and there are stories that retreating Germans would booby-trap them with bombs to explode when picked up. Anyway, Mauser stopped producing the P08s in December of 1943, but would produce some after the war under French occupation, as well as Lugers being produced in France. Most went to the police forces and colonial conflicts. Now, while I tried to obtain a World War I era Luger, mine was made in 1938 by Mauser, and this is the first time I owned one that consistently fired. The accuracy of this is dead on. This is one of the most accurate pistols I have ever shot. One of the most important things in a gunfight is shot placement, and the Luger is one of the best pistols in the world for that. Even this pistol had some malfunctions, even though I used 147 and 124 grain ammo, but I can see why many love this pistol. As for comparison to other World War I era pistols, I'll do a whole other video on that sometime before November 11th this year, when I compare and rank the ones that I've shot. Please make sure you're aware of where your elected officials and the groups who claim to represent you stand on the Second Amendment. You just might find the Republican you supported and the NRA stand closer to Feinstein than they do you. Please join the GOA, a no-compromise organization that keeps you informed of what's really going on, and most importantly, your state's organizations who do the most fighting that pertains to you. Please check out my other videos, comment, like, and subscribe. Also, please check out my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and who I support on Patreon. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day.